Okay, let's dive in. We're looking at Exodus chapter 30 today,
Right.
and it's all about these, well, incredibly specific instructions for the tabernacle, the service, all of that.
Mm-hmm. It really gets into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, our goal here is really to unpack these commands, the altars, the washing, the special oils, the incense,
Yeah,
trying to grasp what they were for, their significance, at least according to the text itself.
exactly. It's where this sort of divine blueprint meets the practical,
Mm.
but it's all deeply symbolic too. The
Mm.
actions, the items, defining that sacred space and how you interact within it.
So let's kick things off with something central to the daily routine.
Yeah.
The altar of incense. The level of detail on how to build it is pretty amazing.
Oh, it really is. Super precise. It says acacia wood, a cubit long, a cubit wide, so what, about 18 inches square,
Something like that.
but then 2 cubits high, so, noticeably tall that it is wide. And it mentions these horns, they have to be part of the altar itself, not just stuck on.
Integral to it.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And the whole thing completely overlaid with pure gold. Even mentions a gold molding around the top and gold rings for the carrying poles.
Wow. So this really beautiful gold altar, it has a very specific spot in the tabernacle, doesn't it?
It does. Right in front of the curtain, the one separating the holy place from the most holy place. Specifically, it's positioned before the Ark of the Testimony and that atonement cover, the mercy seat.
Okay.
And the text actually points this out as the place where God will meet with Moses. So its location is key. It links that daily service area directly to the ultimate holiness behind the veil.
Right, at that threshold almost. And its main job isn't animal sacrifice, like the other big altar.
No, not at all.
Right.
This one is purely about burning fragrant incense. Aaron, the high priest, has this task every single day.
Every day.
Yep. Burn incense in the morning when he takes care of the lamps, and burn it again in the evening when he lights them. It's described as a regular burning, a constant thing before the Lord, meant to continue for generations.
A constant fragrance, but the rules about what can be burned there are really tight.
Extremely tight. Only this specific fragrant incense blend, which we'll probably get to later.
Okay.
The text explicitly says no other incense. And definitely no burnt offerings, no grain offerings, no drink offerings on this altar. Those happen elsewhere. This one has a singular, very sacred purpose.
And there's also a yearly ritual tied to it.
Yes, once a year. On the Day of Atonement, Aaron has to make atonement on the horns of this specific altar. He uses blood from the sin offering for atonement.
Ah, so connecting the daily ritual to the big annual cleansing.
Precisely. It brings it all together.
And the text is clear about its status, most holy to the Lord. It's just fascinating. Such detail for one item, the build, the place, the daily use, the restrictions, the yearly ritual, this most holy designation. What does all that specificity tell us? Why focus so much on this one altar?
Well, I think it really signals its unique role. It's not like the main altar outside dealing with sin and various offerings from the people. This one is inside, right before the very presence, associated with perhaps prayer, mediation, the constant upward flow towards the divine.
Like the prayers ascending.
Possibly. No. The daily incense, alongside the lamps always burning, suggests this continuous service, this constant acknowledgement and perhaps intercession, always connected to the means of atonement applied yearly. It gives that daily worship its own distinct focus point.
That really sets it apart. Okay, shifting gears a bit, from the furniture to the people themselves, the chapter talks about money related to taking a census.
Yes, the ransom money. It's explicitly tied to numbering the Israelites. The command is, when you count them, every person counted has to give a ransom for his life to the Lord.
A ransom for his life. And if they don't pay?
The consequence sounds pretty severe. A plague will strike them when they're numbered. It's presented almost as a protective measure. Paying this averts disaster during the vulnerable act of counting the community.
Okay, wow. How much was it?
A half shekel. The text specifies it's based on the sanctuary shekel, which is 20 gerahs, so a standard specific weight. This half shekel is explicitly called an offering to the Lord.
And who had to pay? Just the leaders?
No, everyone counted. Specifically, everyone 20 years old or older.
And here's maybe the most striking part. Everyone pays the same.
Exactly. The text couldn't be clearer. The rich shall not give more, and the poor shall not give less than the half shekel. Complete equality in this payment.
Why? What was the purpose of this equal payment?
Its stated purpose is to make atonement for your lives. It acts as that ransom, that covering. And then, functionally, the money collected goes towards the service, the upkeep of the tent of meeting.
And it serves as a memorial, too, the text says. So it implies every life counted has this inherent value needing atonement, and that value is equal in God's eyes, regardless of wealth. And their collective payment supports the very place where atonement happens.
hmm It really underscores that equality before the divine and ties individual worth and redemption directly to supporting the communal worship structure.
Okay, next up is an item focused on purity, the bronze basin.
Right? Described fairly simply, a bronze basin with a bronze stand. Its function is straightforward too. Hold water for washing.
And it's specifically for Aaron and his sons, the priests, to use. When do they have to wash?
The instructions are quite specific on this. Hands and feet. They have to wash whenever they go into the tent of meeting,
Okay.
and also whenever they approach the other altar, the big altar of burnt offering outside, to minister specifically when presenting a fire offering. Both entering the tent and officiating at the altar require this washing.
And like the census ransom, there's a pretty stark warning if they skip this step.
There is. The
Yeah.
text says they must wash so that they will not die.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's presented as a life or death requirement. Ritual purity isn't optional before entering the sacred space or performing these sacred actions.
And this isn't just a one-off rule for Moses' time.
No, it's explicitly called a lasting ordinance for Aaron and his descendants for all generations. It really drives home the significance of ritual purity. It's framed as an absolute necessity for approaching the holy, and failure has fatal consequences within the system. That perceived danger of approaching God unprepared or unclean.
It really emphasizes that boundary, doesn't it, between the everyday and the sacred. Now, speaking of sacred, the chapter gets into two very special, very restricted blends, an oil and an incense. Let's tackle the sacred anointing oil first. This isn't just like nice-smelling oil.
Oh, definitely not. The formula is incredibly specific, unique, and the quantities are precise, measured by that sanctuary shekel again. You've got 500 shekels of liquid myrrh, 250 of fragrant cinnamon, 250 of fragrant cane, 500 shekels of cassia, and a hin, a liquid measure of olive oil.
That's quite a recipe.
It is. And it's made by a perfumer into a fragrant blend, but the key is it's designated sacred anointing oil.
And its whole purpose is consecration, setting things apart.
Exactly. It's used to anoint basically everything essential to the tabernacle. The tent of meeting itself, the ark, the table and all its stuff, the lampstand and its accessories, that altar of incense we just talked about, the altar of burnt offering and its utensils, and the washing basin and its stand.
And anointing them actually changes their status.
Yes, the text says they become consecrated, designated most holy. And then there's this intriguing line. Whatever touches these anointed things will become holy too.
Like holiness is contagious.
Sort of, yeah. It marks them as belonging exclusively to the sacred realm.
And it's not just for objects, right? People too.
Correct. Aaron and his sons are anointed with this same oil. It consecrates them specifically for their priestly service. So it sets apart the space, the items, and the personnel.
And the rules about this specific oil are incredibly strict.
Absolutely rigid. It cannot be poured on an ordinary person's body. And crucially, no one is allowed to make any other oil using this exact formula for any other purpose. It's sacred, and they have to treat it as sacred.
And the penalty for breaking these rules?
Severe. Anyone who copies the formula or puts this specific oil on anyone unauthorized must be cut off from his people. Excommunication, essentially. It's a major violation.
Wow. And that same penalty, being cut off, applies to the other special blend in this chapter too, the sacred incense. That recipe is also unique.
It is. Different ingredients, obviously.
Yeah.
Gum resin, onycha galbanum, and pure frankincense. And the instruction is key. Equal amounts of each.
Equal amounts.
Yes, made into a fragrant blend by a perfumer again. And like the oil, it's not just nice smelling, it has to be salted, pure, and explicitly called sacred.
And part of this gets ground up finally. Where does it go?
It's placed in front of the testimony in the tent of meeting. That's where God meets with Moses, linking it directly back to the altar of incense and that point of divine contact. This is the stuff that gets burned daily.
And its status is just as high.
It's this high. It shall be most holy to the people. It shares that top-tier sacredness with the altar of incense and the things anointed by the oil.
And the restrictions and penalty? Same as the oil.
Exactly the same. An absolute prohibition. Do not make any incense with this formula for yourselves. You have to consider it holy, belonging only to the Lord.
Even making something similar just to enjoy the smell yourself is forbidden?
Yes. Making any incense like it, just for personal pleasure, carries that same penalty, being cut off from the community.
So, both the oil and the incense, unique formulas, strictly controlled, forbidden for any personal use, backed by this ultimate penalty of exclusion. What does that level of restriction, repeated for both, really hammer home about holiness here?
Well, it screams that these substances aren't just, ingredients. Their specific composition, their specific use is intrinsically tied to the divine presence and service. To copy them for everyday use isn't just imitation. It's seen as a deep violation of that sacred versus profane boundary. It's like trying to take something that belongs exclusively to God and make it common. It emphasizes that holiness, in this context, is something distinct, powerful, set apart, and fiercely protected by divine command. You don't mess with it.
Yeah, this chapter, Exodus 30, it really is like a masterclass in the meticulous care needed to set up and maintain that sacred space, those sacred rituals.
Absolutely. You've got the instructions for these key pieces, the incense altar for that daily connection and yearly atonement link, the ransom money showing equal value and funding the whole operation, the basin for that non-negotiable purity before service, the special oil setting apart objects and people, and the special incense for that required fragrance in God's presence.
And running through all these details are these huge themes. Holiness above all, that strict separation between sacred and common, atonement needed for people and even objects, and these really serious, tangible consequences if you deviate.
It really paints a picture of what was required according to this text for ordered, acceptable approach to the divine, defining the boundaries with absolute clarity and, well, pretty severe penalties.
So, when you consider just how incredibly detailed these commands are down to the last shekel, the specific spices, and those harsh penalties for misuse, or even just copying them casually, what does this ancient text really suggest to you about how they perceived that line between the sacred and the mundane? And just how vital obedience was thought to be in keeping that line clear. It really makes you think, doesn't it, about the carefulness required to approach the holy.